You can see my screen.
Yes,
And
we can.
we have that done. And welcome everyone to this webinar about best practices about migrating your customers to Business Central SaaS. My name is Mark Brummel. I'm a technical fellow at the QBS group, and today I will be presenting the gold nuggets that make the difference when you migrate from NAV or Navision to Business Central. So let's get going. We have a lot of ground to cover. Today's presentation is color-coded into 4 different categories. For color inspiration, I've used a logo that we're all familiar with, at least I hope so. The first color is green, which stands for sales and marketing, and this is what we will start with. Yellow stands for developers and architects, which is my bread and butter, and blue is marked for consultants and implementers. The last category is red for support engineers, not because they are dangerous. Being the first lifeline for customers on the cloud, they actually have the responsibility to prevent things from turning red or have the tools to make them back into green if this happens. For those of you who have been in my presentations before, you know that my presentations often have a theme. And today's theme is Minecraft. And I've done that for several reasons. First, because Minecraft is about building worlds with predefined building blocks and tools, where everybody can get started, but there is no manual. There's no manual for Minecraft. You need to get started by watching YouTube videos where experienced Minecrafters explain what to do. If you get more and more experienced and involved in the community, you can build awesome stuff within a game which your first impression was, oh my god, what do I do and how do I get started? Minecraft was bought by Microsoft because they are the best. But they don't actually use that much Microsoft technology at all. In fact, it runs on Java, and the whole Minecraft experience just feels extremely un-Microsofty to someone like me who has Microsoft injected into their DNA. But that is what the new Microsoft is all about. The new Microsoft is about being the best in what you do and providing the tools what you need to do this, regardless of technology. So let's get started with the sales and marketing folks, and we'll go with the different colors down the line. So all of the information in today's webinar has been collected by talking to QBS partners in the last 3 months, especially in the Benelux area, and analyzing what makes them stand out when implementing Business Central. Why are certain partners more successful than others? It all starts with marketing. How do you let the customers know that Business Central is ready for them and that they should be ready for Business Central? First and foremost, you should organize a webinar for all your customers and prospects. Webinars have a very low entry level. People don't have to leave their offices and they can join them. And if you share your webinar online, they can even watch it at their own convenience, or if it's what they prefer, they can do it anonymously. Your webinar needs to stand out, because if every QBS partner does this, we have 1,000 of these webinars. Your webinar needs to focus at your customers, at your vertical, and at the reason why your customers chose you instead of someone else. You need to implement this in the search criteria for the webinar, and it needs to be clear within the first 15 to 30 seconds that it's worth watching the video. Not everybody will want to be first. There's low-hanging fruit, and you will probably want to look for early adopters. Most partners of QBS have passed this phase, and they have at least 1 or 2 customers up and running. The reason why this is important is that you want your team to get experience, but you also want to get the feedback from your customers, and you want to know that they are happy. With the BC16 being the latest release, we essentially have all the ingredients for happy customers, together with a stunning 700 apps in AppSource. Last but definitely not least, you should make existing customers aware that there's a massive discount if they commit to the cloud. I'll get back to this on the next slide, but it's easy to prove that migrating from NAV to Business Central SaaS reduces the total cost of ownership, and it introduces simplicity and connectivity options beyond your wildest dreams. calculate the total cost of ownership of running Business Central SaaS, QBS has developed a calculator in which key values such as number of seats, but also typical on-prem costs like Windows licenses and maintenance cost can be entered. The values of this specific sheet on your screen right now is from one of my own customers, where you can actually see in real life figures that the cost of running BC SaaS is lower on an annual basis. And we were careful by putting in these costs. And this is also before Microsoft moved the discount from 40% to 60% last week. Essentially, I think you as a partner should fill in this sheet for every customer and just send it to them to show that they can save money on a year-by-year basis by moving to the latest version of Business Central. To me, this is a pure win-win. But how do you sell the final upgrade to your customer? This is one last manual upgrade before they start on the journey with Business Central, where Microsoft takes over the responsibility of upgrades. It all comes down to the level of customizations. This is something that needs to be carefully analyzed. And from this analysis, in my experience, there can only be three outcomes. Low-hanging fruit with simple customizations can be converted to the cloud with a full upgrade. For more complex customers, my recommendation is to only convert data. I'll get back to this in the first developer slide, because of course, customer needs more than data. But this is something that you can do on a large scale. The large category, and this is actually what I prefer most, is the category of customers that are extremely customized. And we don't want to leave those customers behind. A customer left behind is essentially a lost customer. My recommendation for these customers is to at least convert them to what I call the golden seaside version. And you can argue if that's the last version of NAV or the first version of Business Central. Once they are on the golden seaside version, they can use the next 3 years to clean up and to prepare for their journey to Business Central. We've all learned from the past with classic clients that once you start leaving those customers too long behind, it gets exponentially more difficult. And I'll get back to that in a minute as well. The main question here is, how do you execute this? If you're a QBS partner and you have a 50 or 100 or you have 150 customers, how do you scale this? We want to upgrade all of our customers to Business Central within the next 3 years or 36 months. The only way to efficiently do this without risk or killing your team is to outsource this to specialists. Specialists are people who do nothing else but NAV upgrades. Personally, I've been doing Navision since 1997, which is almost 25 years. I've done many upgrades, but I've only did upgrades twice myself. My first upgrade was essentially my last upgrade. After this horrible experience, I decided to change my programming habits and to outsource my future upgrades. The only exception to this is a few years ago when I did an upgrade that did not involve a data conversion and my code already had event subscribers and page extensions. But every single update I did, I outsourced. And within our ecosystem, there are many upgrade service centers, but the one affiliated with QBS, of course, is One Click Factory. I've heard many wonderful stories from partners, and based on these stories, I can highly recommend working with them and execute these options for one of your customers. To make this decision even easier, One Click Factory has an offering that stands until June 20th to get the free analysis, no matter how complex your system is. And to me, if I were a QBS partner, it would be a no-brainer to give this a try and to get an estimate on one of my customers at least. Lastly, before we go into the developers, I want to talk about the upgrade cost to Business Central. And this is, I think, where we can learn something from the past. When Microsoft introduced the rotated concept with the service tier and the rotated client and pages and RDLC, I think we learned that the longer we leave the customers behind, the more expensive the upgrade will get. There are always mandatory versions that you have to go past in order to move on to next versions. If your customer wants to move from Business Central from NAV 2013, they have to pass a certain number of versions in order to upgrade. And if you want to migrate your data from on-prem to SaaS, you need to be on exactly the same version with your on-prem database as Microsoft is with the cloud. And Microsoft is executing updates on the cloud every month or every 2 months. Within QBS in the last couple of months, I helped one partner who was trying to upgrade, and they had a successful migration with Business Central 15.1, but they run into a bug with the upgrade, and then they had to do it again. But by the time they were ready to do it again, Microsoft was on 15.4, and then they upgraded it again, and then they ran into an issue, and then Microsoft was on version 16, and then they tried it again, and Microsoft was on 16.1. If you want to do this as a partner yourself, then be my guest, but it's a nightmare. And if you outsource this to specialists, then you also outsource the risk of something going wrong. And if these guys do nothing but upgrades, they know exactly what they're doing, and they can mitigate those risks and spread them across multiple upgrades. And that's basically where the cost curve go from going up to going down, because once you are on the upgrade train, then Microsoft will take over the responsibility of your upgrade. So let's switch to developers and architects. We have a lot of ground to cover today, and this is my home turf. This is what I like most. So we thought about the different ways of upgrading your customer to Business Central, and one of them is that if they have a lot of customizations, to have one-click factory handle the data. But what about the business logic? And this is, I think, where a great free of charge tool gets in. In the NAV community, we all love tools, and we all love making tools, but only few people are good at making tools. And I'll get back to that a little bit later. This tool, I think, stands out from the rest because converting code from NAV to Business Central can be a tedious job, and the tooling that Microsoft has delivered actually forces you to be on the last version with your C side. So essentially, you cannot convert code from NAV 2013 or 2015 or classic NAV directly into Business Central. And what ForNAV has done is that they have made the ability to go into C side, any version, and export to TXT, and convert that to BC code. So what that essentially enables you to do is to say, okay, I have a complex customer. The complex customer is on NAV 2013. I don't want to care about the data upgrade. The data upgrade is very tedious and it has a lot of risks. So I'm outsourcing the data upgrade to one-click factory. And I'm going to worry about the business logic. And the business logic is where you as a partner know your customer. You know your customer, you've worked with them for 10 years or 15 years, and you know why certain things have been done. And what you can do is you can take that data converted database and you can start matching that data with the business logic and start finding event subscribers where you can find subscribe code to. And this is, I think, where you can find a balance in cost-efficient upgrading, where you mitigate the risk, you put the risk where it belongs with somebody who knows what they're doing, and you as a partner, you know your customer inside out. You've been working with them for 10 years, and you do the business logic together with them, and you make sure that everything works together. We even had a customer trying to do this with Classic. We had a customer approaching saying, oh, I have a Navision Financials 2.6, and I'm trying to run it through the ForNAV converter, and it doesn't work. Well, the ForNAV converter doesn't convert your pages, your forms to pages. So you have to do that manually. And actually, the recommendation is to use Merge Tool for that. Merge Tool is a tool that many developers will know from back in the days when we moved from forms to pages. And what you can actually do is you can take that Navision Financials 4.0 database or 2.5 or 3.6 or whatever, and convert those forms to pages with the Merge Tool. Take those pages and convert them to AL extensions using the ForNAV converter. And that will probably make the cost of the upgrade doable if you want to take that giant leap from Classic to Business Central without losing the data. So that's something that I would really encourage everybody to investigate. Translations is also something that I hear a lot of developers complain about. It's horrible to do translations in AL. And you can do the translations in Excel if you want. You can keep the translation in Excel just like this. This is an Excel sheet with translations where you have the key in AL and you just have all the translations in different languages. And you can apply this Excel sheet by just running one line of PowerShell. And this is the line of PowerShell. And it's basically taking the Excel sheet and applying the Excel sheet to an XLIF file. And boom, your translations are done. And it just makes life so much easier. And you can actually do automated translations because you can download a plugin in Excel. Excel has a translation plugin, and you can take a column of captions, and you can translate them in Japanese using machine language, and apply them to your data, to your extension. This is just a slide that I slapped in that explains a little bit about the conversion tool that ForNAV has created. It's 100% free of charge. So you can just download it and get started, no caveats. And if you find a bug, they probably fix it for you as well. So in my previous webinar, I showed this diagram, and this diagram shows the steps of converting Business Central as a developer. And it shows that even before starting to talk about AL code, there's certain things that you have to do as a prerequisite, like data storage and interfacing. And these things need to be covered before you can even start looking at AL code. And to solve these two issues, I think it's essential for every architect to have at least some knowledge about the Azure Stack. The most important ones are data storage, aka direct file access, and .NET interoperability, which is interfacing. I think the Azure Stack has a few options that every solution architect should understand the basics about. And if you understand the basics as an architect, you can decide if you want to learn this yourself and become an expert, or if you want to outsource it or hire somebody to do it. The first two ones, I think, should be learned by everybody on the Business Central development team. They are extremely easy to understand and incredibly powerful. And it's basically blob storage and logic apps. Blob storage is basically where you get an API into a location in Azure where you can store files, and it can literally handle millions and millions of files without costing much. Everything is stream-based, and it is actually relatively easy to convert from traditional file storage to Azure Blob Storage once you know how to do it. The other one is logic apps, and logic apps is basically where you can start doing trigger-based programming. And this is where I know that a lot of partners in the past have been using FTP tools. You can download FTP DLLs, you can connect those FTP DLLs to the NAV job queue, and then you can trigger something in Business Central once a file gets downloaded to do something with EDI or telebanking. And this is basically where logic apps comes in, where there's built-in triggers where you can do something when a file is put on FTP storage or something like that. Logic app is kind of like Flow in Power Apps, but it's for developers. And if you have a logic app, you can do WYSIWYG configuration, but you can actually just download the source and start coding in the source as well. And it's a bit like Pages in Business Central, where there is a WYSIWYG converter, but once you know what you're doing, you're probably going into the code, and you're going to code those logic apps yourself. One that I only started to work with recently is Cosmos. Cosmos has this reputation of being expensive, and for companies like Amazon that distribute their data across the globe. But Microsoft actually recently decided to price Cosmos in an interesting level for SMB market. And I think Cosmos is basically the solution for data storage, because with Business Central, we now have a data limit, and even though the data limit is based on compressed data, and 80 gigs is actually the equivalent of 200 gigabyte online, you probably still want to stop treating this NAV database as your data warehouse. We've all been treating NAV database as a data warehouse because the NAV database was what we had, and on-premise you only have a limited number of servers and resources. But with the cloud, I think Cosmos becomes an excellent place of storing data, and from Cosmos you can visualize it in Power BI, and there's a whole bunch of ways to get the data out of there. And Cosmos has cold storage and hot storage, and database storage is priced accordingly. And it's definitely something that I think that at least if you take your responsibility as an AL architect seriously, that Cosmos should be something that you should know the possibilities about. Then, as a no-brainer, we have Azure Functions. Azure Functions are the replacement for .NET. And it's actually not that hard to take a C# DLL and convert it into an Azure function. This is where I also decided for myself that I think I should be at least the same level of expert that I was on .NET interoperability. And you'll find it amazingly easy once you know how to get started to put that first Azure function online. And this is also where the Minecraft similarity gets in, because of course the first function or programming language that you think of when you talk about .NET interoperability is C#. But with Azure Functions, it's basically about a JSON going in and a JSON going out, and then manipulating the data using whatever you want to do. And you don't need to use C# for that. You can use any programming language that Azure Functions support. So if you're a Python guy or JavaScript guy, you can write an Azure function in those languages, if that's what you prefer. But obviously C# is the equivalent of what we did on-premise back in the days. And the last one is web apps. And web apps is basically where you can take the API from Business Central and render the data based on an MVC app, and basically step out of that look and feel of the UI if you want to make apps look a little bit different than a web client. Web apps is of the whole list here. Web apps is what I know least about, but I know enough to talk about this with web developers and at least have a conversation about what the API should look like, and how to handle the transactions going back and forth. So I think this is what a modern Business Central architecture should look like. This is a slide that I took from my previous presentation. We have Azure Functions on the top left, which replace the C# DLLs. For visual tooling, we use Power BI, but also modern frameworks like Angular, and I'll get back to that in a moment as well. And the Power Platform can be used for things like portals and simple apps that only do one thing, like in the warehouse. Business Central, out of the box, is connected to CDS. I'll get back to that in a minute. And that basically allows you to do these low-code and no-code apps really quickly. Data analysis is my favorite part, where you can start connecting machine learning and Cosmos to Business Central using the OData query language. And on the right, we have what I call Azure commodities. This is what everybody should know. I mean, this is probably what every more or less advanced Business Central tenant will have in the future. We have blob storage, we have logic apps, and we have app services. And this is basically what you need to get this connectivity going to the outside world once you no longer have this native access to file storage and FTP. So the next slide is a little bit of a bridge going from developers to consultants, and that's basically JavaScript add-ins. And this is what allows you to take creativity to the next level if people start complaining about the web client, right? If we take the bridge to the consultants and implementers, if you talk to consultants and implementers about Business Central, the first thing that they will start talking about is the web client. Especially if they're a seasoned NAV consultant, they won't stop complaining about this. And this is not fair, or at least it's no longer fair. The web client is on par with the old Windows client and sometimes even better. And if there's something you can find to prove this wrong, don't hesitate to send me an email after this session. I'll share my email address at the end, and I'll promise to take it seriously. And if it's necessary, I'll take it to Mike from the team in Denmark. However, there is one thing that is lacking in Business Central, but this is not web client related. This was also lacking in the Windows client and even in the old classic client. I found this screenshot on Mibuso when I was preparing the webinar, and I was actually looking for something else. But when people think of the Navision Classic client, they think of this like WYSIWYG experience where you can just position everything exactly where you want it. You can use all these colors and all of these things. And this is basically, I think, where JavaScript development comes in. But JavaScript developers is something that you should be careful about because it can easily completely drain all your resources. Web development is not easy, even if you start using frameworks. And as a partner, you really have to decide if JavaScript development is something that you really want to invest in. If your bread and butter is point of sale, then probably the answer is yes. If your bread and butter is manufacturing or production, then you probably want to use to take a look at tools like Netronic or MetaUI. And these guys basically build screens like this in Business Central, where you can really take Business Central to the next level and say, okay, at this specific point in my implementation, the web client is not doing what I expect it to do. And instead of developing my own web components, which is tedious, I'm going to go to these guys because these guys know inside out what it means to develop JavaScript add-ins for Business Central. And they can take it for you, and they can do fixed price implementations and take that risk away from you. So you can focus on converting those 150 customers in the next 360 days. I think you will be able to download the slides later on from some download site, and I've put a YouTube video link here that explains a little bit about one of these products. So if I think about Navision consultants or NAV consultants or Business Central consultants, I think about the quick change. And the quick change is where consultant goes to the customer and say, oh, you want to have this slightly different, I can make that happen. And this is why a lot of consultants, if they grow into their role, they get to be familiar with Seaside and they can make this quick change. Seaside is no longer there, and simplicity is not there when it comes to making changes with extensions. Extensions is something that you should get from AppSource. It should be something that you get from an experienced developer, but it should no longer be the case that a consultant goes into a customer and makes a quick change to a Business Central tenant. For this, we have common data services, Power Platform, and Power Platform is connected to Business Central. All the data that you have in Business Central is also in common data services. And this is where a consultant can make no-code and low-code changes. And this may be scary, but let's be honest, Seaside was also scary when you looked at it for the first time. And this is something that you should get yourself familiar with. And when you go into a customer and the customer says, oh, I have this problem and we have a marketing campaign and we need to keep track of this and that. This is basically where you go into CDS, create a new table or pick an existing table and create a quick Power App so they can keep track of that data. And it should not be in Business Central anymore. And remember, it's all in the same platform. It's all in the Azure platform, and everything is accessible with the same ease. let me go back to my notes because I'm getting very, very excited when I talk about all of this stuff. Telebanking, right? This is something that keeps getting back and back until you're completely sick and tired of it. Selling against other cloud solutions always brings up the discussion about banking. In Holland, it's Exact Online, but I'm pretty sure in other countries it's the same thing. And in a modern world, let's be honest, the last thing you want is export, download, and import files into your bank. This is solved with OP+. OP+ is a tool from Germany, and in Germany they have one rule. In Germany, you don't implement Business Central without OP+. And with QBS, we decided to take that rule to Holland, and therefore every tenant that you get from QBS in the Netherlands has OP+ installed out of the box, and you can start using it right away. OP+ has solved the PSD2 banking integration. So just like with all other cloud solutions, you just get a notification that a new bank statement is there and you can download it, or it's already downloaded and you can start working with it. Another thing that I think everybody who has done more than 2 or 3 NAV implementations has been customizing with is reconciliation. Reconciliation out of the box in Business Central is not exactly what you expect from it. Let's put it politically correct. And OP+ has made it very advanced. You can do amazing things like I have a customer and this customer is also a vendor, and if a vendor also even has an outstanding invoice, I don't want to pay the customer, things like that, where you can make all kinds of smart connections within your banking solution. The good news, and this is my bridge from consultants to support, is that in Holland we have a free version. In Holland, we've been using our own telebanking module, and everybody knows the telebanking module inside out. We've all been using it for 25 years, and now we have to switch from this module to OP+. OP+ is not based on the Dutch telebanking module. It has built their own module. And to make life easier for support and to make life easier for consultants, we ship a free version of OP+, which kind of does the same as standard Dutch telebanking, but a little bit more. And on top of that, you can buy the PSD2 bank integration and the advanced reconciliation. So you can have the same look and feel when it comes to banking for all your customers. And for those customers who want to take banking to the next level, can start switching on those features and start saving time by not having to reconcile these payments or not having to download those files and export those files to their banking system anymore. So I think we're doing quite nice on time. I'll probably steal a little bit more of your time than promised. I hope you get until the top of the hour. Maybe we'll need a little bit less. But the next color is red. And that's for support engineers. And the first topic I want to discuss is mitigating risk. Because the promise when Business Central came out was your customer has to never worry about upgrades again. And from a customer perspective, this is true. Customer never has to worry about upgrades. But from a partner perspective, this is not so true. Remember that Microsoft changed blob storage. Now Microsoft is changing sales pricing to be an interface. Maybe they will change item tracking. And what is next? Where does it end? And this link in my slide goes to Yammer, and there's a massive discussion on Yammer that Microsoft is changing sales pricing, and now all the partners have to pay to refactor their solutions. And why do we as a partner have to bleed for Microsoft improving the software? Well, this will never end, and it will always be like this. But we want to convert all these 150 customers in 36 months. So we don't want the support people and the development people to be busy with existing customers. And this is again where One-Click Factory comes in. With One-Click Factory, you can have software assurance. And you can say, okay, this is my extension, and it's preferably a per tenant extension. You can tell One-Click Factory to take over responsibility and say, okay, if Microsoft does something that breaks this extension, fix it, fix price, right? And if you lose money, then I'll buy a beer at Next Directions, but it's your problem. You wanted to be an entrepreneur, right? And I think this is a great answer to those extensions where you kind of have this feeling while implementing the customer that this is going into the red zone, right? You're actually making changes with extensions that you wonder if you should do it and if it doesn't break in the future. So this is something that's definitely, I think, worth looking into. The other thing that I think every support engineer should have in their belt is application insights. This is actually my favorite slide. This is where I spent so much time on in the last 3 months working for QBS. Application Insight is the telemetry tool for Azure. And Microsoft has done a great job connecting Business Central to Application Insights. And this is where you can see things like who is doing blocking, who is running web services, who is doing long running queries. You can even see that a tenant is being spinned up. You can actually, if you know how to interpret application insights, you can even pick up the phone and call Microsoft and say, hey, something is wrong with your backend because I can see this and that, right? So application insight is basically Microsoft being transparent and say, okay, this is what's happening in your tenant. This is our responsibility. And if we do something wrong, please call us and we'll fix it. And this is your responsibility. And this is where you can fix it. Application Insight is more than Business Central. Application Insights, you can connect it to Azure Functions, you can connect it to Logic Apps, you can connect it to Azure SQL Database, to Cosmos, and it's basically, as a NAV partner, this is the tool that you should be using to monitor your customers. I think it's mandatory. I think everybody should set this up for their customers. We will definitely start doing workshops and webinars about this. This saved a lot, some of the QBS partners in the last couple of weeks getting the necessary telemetry to fix issues. Then my last gold nugget, ForNAV reports. This falls in the same category as OP+. It's basically where you can say Microsoft should fix it. It's Microsoft's responsibility to do it. But Microsoft is a platform company, just like with Minecraft, and you have to be creative. And basically what ForNAV has done is that they have brought back reporting to be easy and affordable. And I've actually given it a lot of thought to say, if I do this presentation for QBS, where does ForNAV fit in? Does it fit into the developer? Does it fit into the consultant, or does it fit into the support engineer? And I think it fits into the support engineer, because this is where the customer calls and say, oh, we bought this company and the invoice should look different. We have coronavirus and we should mention that we have this and this change and it has to be reflected on our shipping note, or there's 1,000 reasons why reports change, and reports never change during the implementation, because during the implementation, everybody say they should look and feel the same as the old one, or we want to outscope it because it doesn't fit into the budget. But the support guys always have to make those reporting changes. And basically what you can do with ForNAV is you can go to the web client, you can hit a button and then make a change to a report. There's no way of explaining what it's doing without a demo. Everything is no code and low code. The good news is that ForNAV is part of Life in a Day methodology. If you send somebody to the QBS Life in a Day workshop, ForNAV is now part of that workshop. And ForNAV also solves the direct printing problem. We actually had one partner and they were complaining about RDLC, and I was like, why don't you look at ForNAV? And the answer was, because Microsoft should fix it. And I said, but Microsoft won't fix it. And they said, yeah, but in one of the next versions, we will have reporting extensions. Well, reporting extensions is not going to solve it, because it's only going to allow you to add a field to the dataset. You still have to go into RDLC. You still have to go into Visual Studio. You still have to add those fields. It's still going to be a tedious job, right? And it's the same with direct printing. Microsoft says, yeah, we support direct printing. No, we don't. Microsoft now supports an API for ISVs to support direct printing. And this is also where ForNAV kicks in, and you can actually have those Zebra printers at the warehouse start printing labels when you hit post on those warehouse devices. There is a webinar about ForNAV with QBS on June 25th, and I won't lie about it. I love the product. I've been involved with them for 5 years, and the webinar is done by my brother. It's almost a family company, but I really encourage you to take that webinar and to embrace this product as part of your tool belt, because it will save you an insane amount of time, and you don't want to lose Business Central customers to somebody who does not reject a solution like that. So conclusions, what does it take to win? I found this term day before yesterday, a Cockwomble. What is a Cockwomble? A Cockwomble is a person, usually a male, prone to making outrageously stupid statements and inappropriate behavior while generally having a very high opinion of his own wisdom and scale. What do we hear when we talk to traditional NAV partners? I can do this better than anyone else. Everybody should use my code. This is how I've done it since 1826. If I talk to the successful Business Central partners at QBS, they don't have this attitude. There are 700 apps on AppSource, and today we only talked about 2 of them. Stop making your own tools. You don't have time to make your own tools. You have to convert your customers to Business Central. If you don't convert your customers to Business Central, you will lose them. It's as simple as this, right? That's, I think, the main message. And probably I'm the biggest Cockwomble of all of them, but let's have this discussion over a beer. So I'm a technical fellow at QBS. So that means that if you have a technical blocker and you're a QBS partner, you can call me and we'll have a meeting and we'll see how we can step over this. And technical blockers can be, I'm using Exchange integration. Exchange integration doesn't exist in Business Central. I have mail merge. Mail merge doesn't exist in Business Central. My database is too big. I want to use direct printing. Performance is an issue. What do I do with .NET Interop? How do I speed up my data conversion? How do I convert from CAL to AL? And how do I work with file access? And there's probably half a dozen technical blockers left. But if you're a QBS partner and you have a project going from NAV to Business Central, and you have a technical blocker, call your partner success manager and we'll schedule a session and we'll get that technical blocking gone and we'll move the project forward together. Then keep it simple, stupid. A lot of partners think too complicated. They think that in order to be successful with Business Central, they need to understand Docker, they have DevOps, they need to have PowerShell and automated testing. And this is not the case unless you are an ISV. If you cannot spread this cost of development across 1,000 customers, it is simply too expensive to do this. Instead of Docker, you should have a sandbox. Instead of DevOps, you should use GitHub. Instead of PowerShell, just press F5 from Visual Studio Code. And instead of automated testing, use the one-click factory software insurance. And then you can keep the budget down. Then you can go back to this classical Navision, keep it simple, fast implementation, and only then we can get these customers up and running with Business Central. Because remember, simplicity always wins, period. Don't overcomplicate stuff and reuse something that somebody else has already done. Get that Cockwomble attitude out of your company and start acting like a community. Call to action. This is what I want you guys to do before September 1st. If after September 1st this list is not checked, then I will probably still help you, but let me at least try to make a thread. Sales and marketing guys, organize the webinar. Use the calculator for all of your customers and start getting at least the first couple of quotes from One Click Factory. Consultants and implementers, learn OP+. Start getting familiar with Power Platform and get a demo of either MetaUI or Netronic, at least when the customer says web client is not good, at least you should have the answer. You should not be with your back against the wall and say, yeah, then we stop the project. No, we're not stopping the project. We'll implement the solution. Developers and architects, be familiar with Azure. Don't be afraid of blob storage. It's not that hard. I mean, Azure was a moving target. These parts of Azure have now been stabilized. Learn JavaScript. Learning JavaScript is equally important as learning AL. Most of these tools, ForNAV is using JavaScript, MetaUI is using JavaScript. JavaScript is the programming language of the future, because it's the only programming language out there that is truly cross-platform. And start to be familiar with APIs. In a business solution architecture, everything is connected using the OData query language. You should be able to go and open Google Chrome or Microsoft Edge and type an OData query by heart. You should know what a where clause look like or what a top clause look like or something like that. Board engineers, learn application insights, register yourself for a custom query language workshop. Download ForNAV, play with it, design a couple of reports, and look at the software insurance so that if you have a pertinent extension where you think like, oh my, this is something that may possibly break in the future, that you don't get overwhelmed when this happens. This has to be executed before September 1st. That's your homework for today. And to help you do that, we're going to organize a whole bunch of workshops. Don't ask me how, but we are. So we can start training you on these topics. So I've actually done quite well on time. We have run 4 minutes over, but if we consider that, I hope most of you will have another meeting on the top of the hour. We actually do have a few moments for Q&A. Please don't ask questions that take more than 11 minutes to answer. And this is my email address. I have a QBS group email address now, hooray. You can start sending emails into my direction